Hi everyone, we're the team from the Climate Alarm Clock podcast, and we're delighted to be here at the Climate and Nature Summit to talk to you today about COP27, the IPCC and Ireland's climate action plans. So my name is Dara Wynne and I'm originally a primary school teacher, but a few years ago I started to get really worried about climate change and wondering what I could do. And a couple of years ago I decided to start the Climate Alarm Clock podcast. So basically it's a weekly climate news podcast where people can find out what's going on, learn a bit about climate change and figure out what action they can take. And in the first season I was joined by a friend, Anna, who I met doing a master's in climate change in DCU. So Anna, you joined me for the first season.
I did. My name is Anna Pringle. I'm originally from Cleebags, County Donegal, but living in Dublin, not far from Dara. And I had a career in business, took early retirement, and I'm now trying to work on climate stuff as part of the Climate Alarm Clock team.
Yeah, and then in the second season, a couple of people had told us in the first season, guys, we haven't a clue what you're going on about. And one of those people was my good friend Ciara. So we decided to get you involved then, Ciara.
Woo! So I'm the naughty kid in the class. Hey. So yeah, I am a friend of Dara's and a friend of Anna's, but Dara and I have grown up together. So in the last few years, Dara's been banging on about climate change and I have been ignoring him because I didn't want to know. And then at some stage, I don't know what happened, I kind of opened my ears. Yeah, I gave in. I listened to him. I answered the phone. And I started to kind of get more interested in learning more about climate change, but found it really difficult to find any information. When I'd look at the news, there was nothing about it. When I would Google it, it was all gibberish. I do not care for, any big language or complicated explanations. So when Dara started talking about the climate alarm clock, it sounded like exactly what I needed. And I'm sure many other people needed, just normal people having normal discussions about a huge topic and breaking it down and making it actually something that is understandable. So it's been a bit of a journey, but I am so happy to have been a part of it, and you guys have been great at putting me in check and getting me up to speed on science.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing that we try to do, is we try to talk about climate change and try to explain it in a conversational way. And that's what we'll be doing today, discussing COP27, the IPCC and Ireland's climate action plans.
A great album. So what are these things? Come on, guys.
So we'll start off with COP27 and we might ask you all there in the classroom, what do you think COP27 is? So is it a potent greenhouse gas 27 times more damaging than carbon dioxide? Is it an international agreement to reduce CO2 emissions by 2027? Or is it a climate conference? So have a chat with the people around you and decide which of those you think it is. Okay, so COP27 is a climate conference, and this is the 27th COP. So COP is an annual conference. It started in 1995, and it stands for Conference of the Parties. But basically what it is it's all the governments of the world coming together every year to come up with plans that they make about how to take climate action, how to reduce emissions. So that's essentially what it is.
Sounds fantastic, but I bet, knowing you guys, that you're not happy about it. What is it? What's going on? What happened at the last one?
Well, I mean, if you say, what has COP ever done for us first? In going back to 2015, COP21 was a momentous COP because they agreed the Paris Climate Agreement. Have you heard? You might have heard of that.
I have.
And in the Paris Climate Agreement, all the countries in the world signed up to a pledge to reduce emissions, to combat global warming, and to keep warming to 1.5 degrees, or do the best that they can to do that. So that was a major achievement of COP going back to 2015.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
Yeah. So it is. I mean, that's a huge thing. If you think about every country in the world deciding, yeah, we want to get together, we want to tackle this issue, and we want to limit warming. So warming at the moment is about 1.2 degrees of warming. The planet has warmed, and they're trying to limit it to 1.5 degrees. So we're going to see more warming, but not too much more. That's
Brilliant.
If we
plan
take action.
If we do what the Paris
Always with
Agreement
the ifs
said.
and buts.
Yeah.
Tell me more about those ifs and buts.
Well, I mean, the most recent COP with 26, which happened in Glasgow last year, there were a lot of different agreements signed up to there, or different plans signed up for there. I mean, Dara, I think you know a lot about those.
Yeah, there were a few plans. So there was a plan to cut deforestation. There was a plan to reduce global methane emissions. There was a plan to help increase funding to poor countries. And there's also a plan that at COP27, governments would come with more plans to reduce emissions.
You guys are talking about plans,
It's plans,
and like it all sounds
not
good
just
to
plans,
me.
but plans for plans.
Okay, so
so
you
the
don't...
big but about all of that is that progress has been made. Even last year, progress was made, but it's not enough. It's not fast enough. And there's a coalition of groups, environmental groups, who are saying this is greenwashing. This is not fast enough, and they described COP26 as a chaotic shambles.
Chaotic shambles.
Yes, which is pretty tough. So there's a lot of pushback that it's not happening fast enough.
So is COP27 another kind of planning session, strategy session, or is it something that's going to be worthwhile?
Well, stay tuned, watch that space. They have said that one of their main objectives is to turn the Glasgow outcomes into action, not just plans, and then to get going on implementation of those actions. So let's wait and see what happens this week.
Okay, but don't hold our breath.
Don't hold our breath. No, definitely not. I think one positive for me with COP is that lots of stuff goes on in these meetings and they come up with plans, and whether anything actually happens or not, can't really say. But what we do see is we see amazing protests, we see amazing groups getting together, raising awareness, and we see things like this Climate and Nature Summit where people use COP as an excuse in the calendar to raise the issue of climate change. So regardless of what happens in those meetings, some positive stuff, I think, will always come out of COPs.
Okay, well, I'll take a win where I can get it.
Yeah, and I suppose that kind of talking about what impact COP has had, and that kind of leads us on a little bit to climate science. So I'm going to ask everyone another question. So as I said, in 1995 we had the first COP. So since COP1, when all these countries got together to try and figure out ways to reduce global warming in 1995, have global emissions A, increased, B, stayed the same, or C, decreased? So since COP1 in 1995, have global emissions A, increased, B, stayed the same, or C, decreased? So have a chat with the people around you. Which do you think it was? The answer is that emissions have increased. So you can see in our graphic there that every year, despite having all these COPs, that emissions have increased, and or the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere is continuing to increase.
So emissions are on the rise. These COPs keep happening. Should people come off the streets, or should they keep turning up and asking for a change?
Oh, I think people should definitely keep turning up and asking for a change. I think we might talk about it a bit later, but lots of the big changes we have seen when it comes to climate action is almost as a direct result of people taking to the streets, especially the school strikes that we saw in 2019. They had such a big impact on raising awareness of climate action and the need for climate action.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So around this, the emissions are going up. Great. I'm not happy about it. How do you guys know this?
So that's a really good question, Ciara. Any of this stuff that we hear, how do we know the climate is warming? How do we know emissions are going up? And the big answer really is climate science, is through scientists collecting information in a really scientific way. Yeah, exactly.
Those scientists.
So climate scientists measuring CO2 concentrations, climate scientists looking at weather patterns over a long period of time. And one of the best groups that we have to do this are the IPCC?
What a gang. Who are the IPCC?
So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. There's lots of acronyms and language in this. But basically what that is all governments in the UN, the United Nations, have got together. They've got an intergovernmental panel. All countries are represented. And the scientists look at all of the available science about climate and what's happening. And then all of those countries sign off on their reports. So that's what they do. And they compile all the scientific papers. They look at what's happening now and they project what's going to happen in the future based on if we take action or if we don't take action.
Okay, cool. So it's basically just a load of scientists from a lot of different countries.
Yep.
They all agree?
Yep.
They
They
all
work
agree
through
what
the
the
night
problem
and
is?
all agree and they look at all the available science and they all agree this is what's happening.
Okay. And so what are they telling us is happening?
So the IPCC, as Anna said, they compile thousands upon thousands of reports, and this is a huge job. So they only make these big reports every few years, and they released their last big report in 3 parts over the last year. So the first part was out before COP26, and the second 2 parts came out since COP26. So going into COP27, governments will have a lot more information.
Okay.
The headlines of what the IPCC have found is that, first of all, the world is warming faster than ever before. So warming is increasing, and it's increasing at a faster rate. And we've seen lots of impacts this summer in particular, you know, heat waves, drought, fires, lots of impacts. We found that emissions are increasing. They're going up. So we've emitted more in the last 10 years than we did in the previous 10 years. So if you think about us as a global community, we want to reduce emissions. So imagine us, we want to drive a car in one direction. At the moment, we're driving in the wrong direction. And rather than, you know, turning around or even putting the indicator on or pressing the brakes, we're pressing the accelerator. We're going in the wrong direction at the wrong speed. And what this means is that the Paris Agreement target that Anna mentioned of 1.5 degrees, the IPCC are now telling us 7 years later that we're going to miss that target.
Wow.
That the world is going to warm by at least 1.5 degrees. And if we do absolutely everything right, maybe at the end of the century, we'll manage to bring it back down to below 1.5.
Wow.
Yeah.
That does not sound good.
No.
What does that mean? Like, how does that affect us?
Well, I mean, there's like 3.6 billion people today who are seriously impacted by climate change, by their temperature getting hotter where they live, by drought, by flooding, by all of those extreme weather events. So those people are at risk today, not in the future. And the rest of us will be at risk in probably the but this century anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 3.6 billion. And I mean, you were saying about weather events. We already had kind of a crazy summer here in Ireland. So I can only imagine what it's like for these other people.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to think about who those 3.6 billion people are. There's some of the people in the world who have done the least to cause climate change.
Yep.
But not only that, we're such a globally connected world. We're doing this summit virtually. We are connected to people all over the world in terms of the people who make our clothes, the people who make lots of the food we eat, the people who make our phones. And even if we're being really shallow and selfish, if these people are affected, lots of the things that we use in our everyday life are going to be affected. But as the world continues to warm, we're going to see more impacts more often, more people getting affected, and more knock-on effects. And I think one quote that kind of lays it all out there is, "Any further delay in concerted action will miss a brief and rapidly closing window to secure a livable future." So that's pretty stark, and it's telling us we really, really need to take action now.
It's at times like these I always ask myself why I joined this podcast. You guys are just the worst.
Thanks, Ciara.
Have you any other bad news you want to share with me?
Well, now that you mention it, Dara has another thing he wants to talk about.
Go on.
Yeah, so so far we've just talked about climate change, and that is not the whole picture because our biodiversity is under threat as well. And I've got a quiz question for you. So I want you to imagine that we put all the mammals land mammals in the world on weighing scales. So us humans are mammals. Imagine we get all of us and weighed us, and then we get all our livestock mammals, all our pigs or sheep or cattle, and we weigh them. And then we get all the wild mammals in the world and put them on the weighing scales. If we did that and worked them out as a percentage, what do you think that would look like? So do you think it would be an even split between humans, wild animals and livestock? Do you think it would be just 4% mammals, 36% humans and 60% livestock? Or do you think it would be half wild mammals, 35% livestock, 35% humans and 15% livestock? So have a look at the pie charts there. Have a chat with your friends. Which do you think is the correct representation? Okay, so the answer is that just 4% are wild mammals, 60% are livestock, and 36% are humans. So that gives us a bit of a glimpse into what the biodiversity...
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Livestock is in what we're growing.
Eating.
To eat.
So that's 60% is feeding us.
That is insane.
So yeah, I mean, if you think of the world, or I like to think, that there's lots of areas, wild areas that are untouched by people, where there's lots of animals roaming, but actually there's less and less of it. And that's tragic because animals are going extinct, which once again I find is just tragic in its own right. But actually we need this biodiversity. So we rely on biodiversity for food, for clean water, for clean air. Biodiversity is the mix of animals that we have and ecosystems, and we're losing it at an alarming rate.
So the reason it's connected to climate change is, like I said, as things get hotter, it's harder for various organisms to live in a hotter climate. And then what we are doing is we're consuming too much, and that's affecting biodiversity and also leading to climate change. So it's all connected.
Okay, so what are the IPCC telling us we can do to protect it?
They're saying we need to change. We need to change everything, basically. We need to
transform.
transform.
Let's change.
Yeah, transformative action. That's what we need.
They talk about transformative action.
Yeah.
So they're saying it's not just tinkering around the edges. We need to completely change the way we do almost everything. We need to change the way we produce energy. We need to change the way we get around. So we need to move away from car dependency and get more active transport, more public transport.
So are we implementing these transformative actions in Ireland?
Ireland did make a plan to reduce emissions. We have a new climate action plan where we're going to reduce emissions by 50% by 2030. And we've given every sector targets to do this.
I smell a butt.
Let's have a quiz question. Let's have a quiz question. In 2021, Ireland agreed to reduce emissions by 50%. So far in 22, did we reduce emissions? Did they stay the same? Or did they go down? So A, emissions went up. B, they stayed the same. Or C, they went down. Have a chat. What do you think happened?
Do.
So the answer, spoiler alert, it's always the worst answer in my quizzes. A, emissions went up.
Good.
Not good.
No? Okay. Why is that happening? How is that happening?
Well, as Dara said, we've got great plans in Ireland, but unfortunately we're not sticking to our plans. We're not taking the action that we need. So we're delaying and doing much more talk than action.
Sounds like trying to get me out the door.
And this shows you where the emissions are coming from in Ireland. And as you can see, agriculture is the biggest emitter, and then you can see energy, etc. So that just shows you where it's every part of life, every sector in Ireland is contributing to our emissions.
Yeah, and we need to, as I said, we need to transform things, everything, the way we make food, the way we get around, the way we consume things. And I mean, something like this, the Climate and Nature Summit, is brilliant, but there's part of me that really feels it's unfair that we're unloading all this information about how bad things are on secondary school students rather than politicians, because we need this change to come from above, and we need the transformative action to be led by politicians, and they need a plan. And so something that people can do is contact their politicians, ask them to take more action, and we have a little template that people can use if they want to email the politicians, or you can get out on the street and join the protests, because they have had a huge impact. But I suppose, Ciara, you know, myself and Anna have been involved in this area for a while, and nothing really surprises us anymore, and we're used to dealing with this information. But when you get all this negative information thrown at you, how do you deal with it, and how do you take action?
I think for me, what is really difficult is I always get caught in the wheel of, well, I didn't do any of this and I can't make a difference. And I think sometimes it's okay to be in that position, but I think you also have to push yourself into thinking. There was a lovely, lovely quote from Greta Thunberg, which I think is so appropriate, because she is someone who is younger than I am, and she definitely hasn't played a part, you know, like many of you guys, and watching this now in bringing this problem around. So what she said was, when I'm taking action, I don't feel like I am helpless and things are hopeless, because then I feel like I'm doing everything I can, and that gives me hope, especially to see all the other people around the world, the activists who are taking action and who are fighting for their present and for their future. And that for me just really sums it up.
And we know teenagers have had a big impact, because we know Greta has started a worldwide movement. Obviously not everybody can do that, but you can have an impact in your home, with your friends, nagging your parents. There's lots that can be done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think to say that while all this information is overwhelming, if we do take that action, and once again, it's totally unfair that this mess has been left to this generation, but if we do take action and we do all the actions outlined, we will have a better world to live in, a healthier world, a happier world, a world where people probably have to work less and eat healthier and just have a better time. And that's what we kind of hang on to. And it's about finding your niche and finding what you can do. And there's lots of amazing talks coming up in the Climate and Nature Summit. So hopefully throughout the week, you get ideas of what you can do, find a place where you can fit in, and realize that you don't have to know everything. Commit to keep learning, and if you want to keep learning with the Climate Alarm Clock podcast, then that will be brilliant. But hopefully you've picked up a few things there, and that you get a lot out of the rest of the summit and find the way that you can take action going forward. So thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.